Okay, Bona Zira. My name is Bat Sheva Margalit Stern, and I am from the CSIER Institute of Jewish Studies in Jerusalem. And I will be the last presenter for today, hopefully last but not least. And this month, actually, we celebrate the 90th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, so to speak, which even at the time of its occurrence mattered only to a small group of women's network. Romanian Jewish middle-class women on the one hand, and Eretz Israeli women of the working class on the other. If so, what is this declaration, the axis of my talk this afternoon? And I would like to start with a citation from a woman named Ada Margulis to a friend named, Fishman to a friend named Margulis in 1965. And so she writes to her, I have the overwhelming desire to tell you a thing I have kept ever since I came to you the first time in 1927 in Bucharest, and then in 1928 at the WIZO conference in Berlin. We were both young at the time, and you trusted me and agreed with my proposals when the rest of the WIZO leaders still doubted the necessity of a place such as Ayanot. Ada confessed in 1965. But then she continues, the moment when on behalf of your organization you took the responsibility to build a place where girls should be trained in the spirit of pioneering, that very moment I felt the spiritual tie between us. Thus we two have known through Ayanot a deep friendship which lasted for the last 38 years. Ada's depiction of the bond between the two women who had no family ties, were living kilometers apart, and belonged to different nationalities, class, and family status, will be used here as a test case of the ways women formed, managed, and cultivated gender-based relationships. Because these relationships were used for the benefit of the Zionist project in Eretz Israel, I argue that it comes under the definition of national feminism, whose main aim was a partnership in feminist action for the sake of national objectives. The collaboration of Fishman and Margulis highlights the connection between feminism and the rise of nation-state/nationalist movement. What motivated Ada, a pioneer of the second Aliyah, the Zionist Mayflower, if you will, to leave her beloved new homeland and travel to faraway Romania? What were the reasons for the wealthy Zelma Margulis to collaborate with Fishman, and what can be learned from this collaboration? Was this alliance between strangers a unique, a one-time encounter, or rather this was a recurring phenomenon? And if so, in what context? These are the questions I aim to tackle herein. In doing so, I intend to use tools from various theoretical fields. One of them is gender studies, and the other is transnationalism. In her research on gender and nation, Nira Yuval Davis asserts that gender is key to the understanding of the nationalistic phenomenon, citizenship, culture, and national wars and conflicts. In this context, women's role as wives and mothers was instrumental. Indeed, in the past several decades, referring to women as compassionate, merciful, loving, and caring, who are happy to do the toil of love, for which they have biological traits, have been the focus of a vast feminist critique. According to feminist thinkers such as Julie Kristeva, Nancy Chodrow, Sheila Rothbaum, and others, the distribution of social activity based on gender characteristics is the safeguard of a gendered social order. This represents a society based on apparent and concealed dichotomies of power distribution, of resources, social roles, and of social separation between the human sexes, both practical and symbolic. Political groups which fight for the continuation of this gendered social order perceive it as a natural one. This type of love, which oftentimes women perform within the realm of volunteer work, is twofold. Volunteer work saves financial resources which would have been allocated and distributed if the work was performed by men. And as the case study before us illustrates, women's volunteer work also guarantees material and financial benefit. Heidi Hartman argues that the segregated distribution of work preserves women's subjugation and is used as a mechanism to facilitate men's superiority in the labor market in particular and in society in general. I can show you an example of that in the labor market in pre-state Israel. If we see here, the 1930s the census show us that 80% of all workers in services were women, almost 90% almost of all workers in services were women. Cleaning work included and other branches of services. So even in the national revolution, the Zionist national revolution, we see that the labor market was segregated. So women's subjugation is deeply rooted in all institutions of human society, also concludes Sheri Ordner, another feminist thinker. Ada Fishman and Zelma Margulis share an understanding of the Zionist role in liberating Jewish women and advancing them as a subject in a reformed society. The two formed a women's network, one of many networks in which women of all walks of life in different times and cultures participated. In the late 19th century, for instance, feminists of both sides of the Atlantic Ocean formed a sorority which benefited them both. In her book, Golden Cables of Sympathy, McFadden focuses on the emergence of international women's associations and organizational articulation, which by the end of the 19th century came into being in a form of a pre-organizational matrix. This matrix, McFadden argues, was made up of a complex lines of international contacts, association, friendship, argument, and correspondence, and became an important explanatory factor in understanding the growth of women's internationality and connectedness. Ellen Ross shows in her work on British neighborhood women's networks prior to World War I the centrality of working class mothers and housewives to the creation and transmission of working class culture. Indeed, international connectedness and organizational articulation, as well as the transmission of Zionist working class values and principles, are paramount in the case study before us. A coalition of women of all echelons of life was common in women's activism also at the beginning of the 20th century. However, women activists of both labor and middle-class Zionist circles did not relinquish their ties after gaining the suffrage in 1926. Sharing common goals, they furthered their collaboration within the country and abroad long after similar alliances had dissolved elsewhere. The Zionist or the Eretz Israeli phenomenon should be examined in the context of the Zionist quest for sovereignty, for women of Eretz Israel did not act within the confines of an independent state, but rather in a voluntary society. The struggle for equal participation in the political arena was intertwined in the common perception and aspiration of the nature of sovereign Jewish society. Women, particularly those who were educated and enjoyed Zionist awareness, partook in a public discourse of the definition of citizenship and its suitability to their requirements. Their bond to one organizational framework, which, as we will see in the following, was the result of a long and bitter debate, indicates the importance that they attached to the commitment for united feminist action, which was based on accepting the Zionist principles on the one hand, and on their aspiration to overcome what separated them on the other. Transnationalism is key to our understanding of how women of different nationalities, class, and other affiliations interacted. This term refers to economic, social, and political processes taking place beyond and in between the borders of nation-states. Although transnationalism has several definitions, I refer to transnationalism as a culmination of civil political collaboration, economic involvement, and the formation of social networks among individuals and institutions in one or more countries. The modus operandi of the Zionist movement in general, and of the Zionist women in particular, exemplify this definition of transnationalism. Yet, a gender examination of this theoretical term is helpful to the study of the contribution, both financial, cultural, social, and other, of women networks to the national project. Transnationalism existed through myriad channels. Exchange of delegates from one country and organization to another is one. Periodical conferences, assemblies, gatherings, and so forth, both formal and informal, is another. And so is the distribution of information in private and in official letters, books, pamphlets, reports, and minutes, which are present in the network Ada Fishman and Zelma Margulis nourished. In this manner, Ada informed Margulis in 1945 that her new book on Ayanot was published, stating its educational and informative value for the Jews abroad. Utilizing family connections and money was common as well, as can be learned from another letter to Margulis in the fundraising season of 1947. I shall be very grateful if you will get into contact with your brother-in-law and let us know where he has contacts, instructed one of the Vitzo executives at that moment. So who are our protagonists? Who was Ada Fishman? And I'll go straight to this picture. Who was Ada Fishman? Ada Fishman, later Maimon, was born in Makulesht, a village that we heard about before, a poor village in Bessarabia, and was a descendant of a respected rabbinic lineage. She came to Ottoman Eretz Israel in 1912 and became affiliated with Labor Zionism a few years afterwards. She was founder and leader of the Women Workers Movement, established by then British ruled Palestine in 1920. Zelma Margulis, on the other hand, was a prominent member of the upper class of the Jewish community in Bucharest. In 1920, she replaced her mother as the head of a local Zionist women's organization, the ACFE, which you probably heard from Sylvie a few days ago. This organization was founded in 1919. In 1921, the organization joined Vitzo, an international federation of Zionist middle-class women's organizations. The two organizations, the Women Workers Movement and Vitzo, were part of the Zionist movement and accepted the authority of its elected institutions. They shared a political agenda, but their interpretation regarding the place of women in society was different. Vito stood for bourgeois ideas and a liberal perception of the position and role of women, while the women workers' movement supported a socialist worldview. These ideas reflected feminist principles of the time. The empowerment of women laboring in a separate and independent organizational framework alongside an active participation in building the national home, and the women's traditional realms of operation included, was chief among them. The following citation can testify to the common ideas prevailing in the two organizations on the one hand, and the gap between their social classes on the other. In 1951, Rosa Genusar, the head of Vizo Israel, responded to a request by Margulis as follows. You must admit that an elderly middle-class Romanian lady is not the most suitable element for pioneering in Israel at the present. In this, Genusar unveils the Zionist definition of the pioneer, a young, usually male laborer who is willing to shoulder crucial tasks as difficult as they may be. The fact that the women's networks were used also as means of helping the individual woman at times of need is also conveyed in this letter. Helping individual women in dire economic and political times was one of the reasons to establish Ayanot, the big women's workers training farm in 1930. Ayanot is an example both of the partnership Fishman and Margulis crafted, and of the magnitude of the support and aid given by women networks to individual women and to the grand Zionism at the same time. As mentioned before, Ada first met with the Romanian group of Zionist women in 1927 in her tour to the country, during which she visited, among other places, Galatz and Bucharest. By the way, at that year, Shulem Schwarzwald was dismissed from jail. He was the one who assassinated Petlura after the massive massacre of Jews during the Russian Revolution. When Ada was here in Romania and he was dismissed, she read the newspapers. She, by the way, did not speak the language. She knew Yiddish, as you will see. She did not know Romanian, because when she left, it was the Russian Empire. So she wrote to Eretz Israel, to her friends, wow, Shalom Schwarzbard was dismissed, and the Romanian jury is reacting in a way that shows that they have this Jewish sentiment, etc. So to echo what you heard previously. So we have little information, basically, about the threats Fishman weaved with the Romanian women in her 1927 expedition, but they resulted in Margulis' dramatic declaration in the following year in Vizo's gathering in Berlin in 1928. So Margulis assured Fishman, on behalf of Vizo, the ever so needed funds, £21,000 to be exact, for her long hoped for project. Ada, Margulis, and other women activists, such as Ella Balan, also met in Bucharest in 1934, and a few times more when delegates from Romania visited Ayanot and in various Zionist congresses. Could the emotions of respect and affection felt by the two women for each other materialize into such glorious collaboration had it not been for Fishman's perseverance and determination? Would Margulis commit to supply vast sums of her and family money, of her family and Vizo's money, on behalf of, had she not been a zealous Zionist? And would her Romanian colleagues participate in this women's network had it not been for their willing to define and refine their personal identity and their place in the Jewish community in an era of change and mobility. From Margulis's 1928 declaration onward, the intrepid Ada steered the women workers' movement towards an official collaboration between the two women's organizations. In 1931, despite fierce antagonism on part of her comrades in the workers' movement, Fishman managed to strike a deal, and a legal contract was drafted and signed by the two partners. The middle class Vidzo organization and the working class women workers' movement. This contract defined and facilitated their working relations and modes of operation, relating to fundraising and distribution of money in particular. Question is, why? The latter was in a dire need due to the fact that the women workers' apparatus was excluded from the financial support of the Labor Federation, and it needed sources to finance the movement's activity. Instrumental in this transnational covenant, Ada Fishman infused it with a feminist worldview. The women workers' movement should keep its autonomy legally and administratively and financially, despite the fact that now they have this official collaboration. Ada remained loyal to her friend and never forgot her confidence and support, as their correspondence shows. It lasted for many decades. And Margulis reciprocated. In one letter to Fishman, Margulis writes, "To have merited your friendship makes me feel proud, and I am thankful that fate showed me that way." She wrote to Ada in 1965. The exchange of letters persisted, also was a well of information about what is going on in Israel and in Ayanot. The letters continued after the 48 Independence War, after the 56 Sinai campaign, and after the Six-Day War in 1967. Ayanot remained the core of Ada and Margulis's bond. Ada conveyed her gratitude in occasions of Ayanot's anniversaries, as the 1955 silver anniversary points out. Ada viewed her manual and other forms of labor and Margulis's financial contribution as an equal partnership. The one could neither exist nor succeed without the other. She informed Margulis about the developments in their Ayanot and gifted her with fruit from its orchards, as can be learned from a letter to Margulis in 1965. It was nice to know that our Ayanot oranges arrived in time for Pesach, and with wishes to her friend's recovery from an illness, Ada signed, "From the bottom of my heart, I wish you good health. Yours as ever, Ada." Every so often, Ada kept asking, or rather hinting, for funds she needed to help Ayanot surmount its challenges. In February 1948, in the midst of the civil war which erupted in Palestine after the UN declaration, Ada thanked Margulis for her support and sympathy in those hours of great decision, and informed her, among other things, that 40 Romanian boys and girls from Youth Aliyah have joined Ayanot, and signed her letter with affectionate regards and best wishes for you and your family. Ada's letters, as I was saying earlier, were instrumental in distributing data and information about what is going on in Ayanot, meaning how the money given to Ada and Ayanot was spent. So, after the Sinai campaign, Ada vowed in a letter to Margulis as follows: "When you will come to visit, you will see for yourself that I am not exaggerating when I speak about great development. Not only do we have an excellent farm and a high standard in the theoretical studies, but we have now 351 trainees, and the staff of nearly 67 teachers and instructors. Such praise, however, should not be taken at face value alone. Before signing her letter in friendship and best love, Ada did not neglect to mention Ayanot's difficulties due to the shortage in funds. Unlike its comparable agricultural schools, at that time, Ayanot was no longer a women's training farm, but it became an agricultural school, one of several schools that Israel had at the time. Ada says as follows. There was one in Nahalan, another same. Ada says, we don't have a reiche Tante, Yiddish for a wealthy aunt. Now the fact that Ada is using the Yiddish, the Jewish European dialect of yesteryear, in fact reflects the fact that she felt very fragile at that point. She was no longer the lioness who fought to create this project, but now in Israel, other women reign supreme, and Ada reclined more and more to the backstage. So using Yiddish for the Hebrew zealot was really a psychological, if we will, proof to her state of mind. In April 1961, Ada reported that Ayanot is blooming as usually and is developing from year to year. Ada also informed Margulis that 21 newcomers, boys and girls from Romania, have joined the place. She wished her friend, husband and daughter Chag Sameach in Hebrew for Passover and signed the letter, yours Ada. And the letter continues in this manner more and more, and every time a problem emerges in Ayanot, Ada informs Margulis. So we can see here that on the one hand, there is a genuine love and affection and appreciation from Ada to Margulis and from Margulis to Ada, yet their connections had this, how would we say that, aroma of instrumental need of finances. We need to state that in this stage, Margulis was no longer able to contribute that vast sums of money, but Vitzo still, till a certain point, supported Ayanot. Maybe it is the time for me to elaborate a little bit more about why am I so didactic in stating that Ada is informing about how many Romanian boys and girls came to pre-state and the state of Israel. We need to bear in mind that this is too, I'm echoing what we were learning earlier in the previous lecture, about the situation among Romanian Jews as in other European communities during the Holocaust. Ada managed to get access to visas, to immigration permits from Europe to Eretz Israel, from the British authorities. Bear in mind that this is not a sovereign country. We are talking about Zionists who would like to become a sovereign entity, but the British ruled, governed, and closed or opened the gates to Eretz Israel. Ada managed, after a long and bitter debate like she was used to get a handful of certificates. Now the question rises, how will she distribute them? Is it fair to give all so dear certificates to one group of Jews, Romania, because the Romanian Jewry, the Romanian women financed her? Can she do that? So the distribution of licenses, of permits to get to Eretz Israel was based on a partisan distribution. The parties who had more Zionist votes got more licenses. And Ada managed to carve a situation, a definition of distribution based upon gender definition. This too was a revolution, because the British, like the Zionist establishment, discriminated Jewish Olot immigrants from Jewish Olim. Now, in order not to be too glim or sober about it, we need to understand that the conditions in the country were like that they needed young, strong men with muscles. How many Jews at that time could go for this definition? This is not a question, but still, they preferred men. But Adam managed to convince colleagues and the Zionist establishment to give her a sum to distribute. Every distribution of licenses, she reports to Romania. Sometimes unofficially in a letter to Margulis, other times in a strict minute or report, as I mentioned before. Okay, so that's why she continues reporting that Romanian boys and girls are coming. If you will, with a blink of an eye, it's okay. Rest assured that your money did not go to waste. Now, she always remembers and she does not neglect to mention as follows. I am always glad to know that our friendship is as warm as it always was, despite the great distance between us. At that time, Margulis did not live in Romania, she moved to the United States and to Canada, but needless to say that a distance at that period at that time was not as we are used to today. A letter took a long time to get, let alone during war times. There were periods of more than a year that the one could not answer the other, and so forth, which is only understandable under the circumstances that both of them were. Anna did not fail to invite her friend to every celebration in Ayanot, knowing well that she would not come. Going to Israel at that time, in the 1950s or 60s, from the United States, was A, very costly, and B, demanding physically. And they grew older, and it was much more difficult. An example to such an invitation was in 1970, a few years before Ada's death. She died at the age of 80, when the 73 war erupted. At the very same day, Saturday, okay. This time she invited Margulis to the opening event of a new cultural center, which she, the intrepid Ada, managed to build when she was almost 80 years old, after a long and frustrating negotiation with the authorities. So had it been stopped here, we could have the impression that it's a one-woman show against the race of the villains. But let me come to my conclusion, and then we can open it, because gender is crucial to analyze what I'm trying to convey here. So the collaboration of the women's organizations, Vitzo and the Women Workers Movement, was not free from mishaps and difficulties, but its very existence calls for re-examination of the internal relations between the women's organization and Zionism, their contribution, and the importance of the entanglement of personal relationships between women. The women's activity analyzed here cross definitions of class, politics, geographic, and other affiliations. They presented a conscious transnational bond that had two common threads: Zionism, i.e. nationalism, and feminism. The railing of women to the national Zionist arena was encouraged by the men in their families and community, as Margulis' biography and the biography of another prominent Romanian philanthropist from Bucharest, the playwright Cecil Dinaman, affirm. Cecil Dinaman had one of her plays going on stage, and the funds she got from that play was contributed to Ada and Ayanot. Did we hear about Cecil Dinaman? One of the wealthiest women in Bucharest, Jewish women at that time, and we know very little about them. This sisterhood of Zionist women was not impeded by differences in class, political and social orientation. In all those schisms, national feminism had the upper hand, and that, while challenging women's discrimination and exclusion from power, which prevailed in Zionist society as in other national contexts. Not only did the women endeavor to remedy the shortcomings and myopia of the Zionist establishment, but they also demanded that the promises made to them by the Zionist movement since its foundation be kept. And so, feminism, in whose name the women operated, became the guardian of national morality for which they yearned. Thank you. I propose to open the floor to comments, questions. I will elaborate per request. So it's yours. The stage is yours.
Do you know of any other examples of such cooperation?
Oh yeah. Thank you. My new project, let's say my new research is on, as you can tell, is about women's networks in transnationalist context. One, if you will, branch is European Jewry. Bear in mind, I'm dealing among the Jews. One branch is the European Jewry, Romania, for instance, Britain. Another example, Vera Weizmann, who was one of the establishers. She was one of the founders of WIZO International, for instance, and later the wife of the first president of Israel, Chaim Weizmann. Vera Weizmann from Britain is another example, not only she. So we have Britain, we have Romania, we have Poland. I do not deal with Eastern Europe besides Romania, because much of the correspondence is in English and I can read it or Yiddish. I don't speak Romanian, unfortunately, but Sylvie was very generous in helping me translate. And so this is one branch. Another extremely important, as we know, was the United States. So we have a collaboration extremely interesting. This time, not between bourgeois ladies, like Hadassah. You probably heard, are familiar with the term. Hadassah is an organization of middle-class, wealthy, Americanized ladies. One of them was Henrietta Salt, if any of you heard of her. Henrietta Salt was the head of the Aliyat Noir, the youth movement that I mentioned beforehand. Now, the women workers movement, despite others' wish, by the way, this is an internal dispute, if you will. The women workers movement created a bond with a socialist group of women in New York, members of Coalition, if the terms are familiar to you, and they were a sisterhood of women. They brought money to pre-state, they helped create farms for women. Rachel Yelait had a farm in Jerusalem, financed by those Jewish socialist American women. Now, when I say transnationalism, I neglect or I conceal the fact that it is true. It is transnationalism, but still, among the Jews, we have this Kol Yisrael Achim. We have this, we heard, I saw it, I think in there, one of the prayers, you know, that we vouch for each other. So, what am I so excited about? The fact that Jews in the 20th century were already assimilating into their countries, like in Romania and other places, which made the Holocaust even more horrible. And what we heard earlier from Adrian, they were becoming Romanian in nationality. So how to maintain both national modern identity, Romanian, American, Polish, whatever, and to be loyal to the transnationalist movement of Zionism. One answer, if you would like me to continue, is would you like me to go there? I finish my sentence and I let you ask your questions. Go ahead, you may ask me freely, but I just finished this sentence because I'm not sure how much of this Zionist history you know. it was a double-edged sword, as you well know. On the one hand, being loyal to Zionism meant that maybe Jews are not so loyal to their respective countries, Romania, Poland, etc. Indeed, in anti-Semitism discourse, you might find exactly those accusations. Yet on the other hand, unfortunately, as we all know, if I may add my 2 cents of historical interpretation, assimilation or acculturization or becoming a citizen of the country, as you well reacted to the question, is anti-Semitism is over earlier, right? Was not complete. Let me state it this way, it was not complete. And Jews felt, as I was commenting earlier, that the ground is shaking, that maybe it is not so secured. Maybe they should indeed collaborate with the Zionist movement, which between the 2 world wars became a rescue. Okay.
Thank you. 2 things. First of all, the Zionism appeared because of raising of anti-Semitism and the shock of the almost assimilated Jews.
Okay.
On one hand, and on another hand, I want to ask you why you are calling Zionist transnational movement, because as a matter of fact, it is very national.
Okay, thank you.
It is the Jewish nationalism. And third, just a joke, your story was exactly the old saying, what it is Zionism? A Jew is asking money from another Jew to send a third Jew to Eretz Israel.
Well, this was the practice, but if we reduce, I will answer your question about nationalism. If we reduce the connections, the relations, the sense of self-importance, like the identity I get when I become a Zionist, if you reduce it to money exchange, then I have nothing to do, first of all, as a historian. B, it will be extremely false, because, as Ada showed in her books, it was a campaign of educating the Jews, of helping them in dire times, political times, to gain a new identity which gives them respect in place of the fallen one, the emancipated one. Did it succeed? To some extent. But it was more than getting money. By the way, there is a huge discourse, a fight even, between Weizmann and Brandeis from the United States about what is feminism. And the Eretz Israeli Zionists ask, what is Zionism? Sorry, what is Zionism? What is feminism? Pretty much no. What is Zionism? So the Eretz Israeli Zionists are saying, excuse me, you do not come to toil here with us. Thank you very much, you are not Zionists. You are sympathizers, but you are not Zionists. Ada is making this definition broader, and she really thinks that she and Margulis, an Eretz Israeli woman, formerly Romanian too, although it was the Russian Empire from the Sarabia, and Margulis are working together from both sides of the tunnel to create this nationalistic movement. Now, why transnationalism? As I defined the term earlier, it involves cultures, it involves people from various national countries, from various national political places, different countries, and they get in return a more complex identity. And the new identity, we might see it as a result of transnationalistic connections. So it is true, Zionism is the nationalistic movement, but for the people, it is a transaction that crosses national borders, national political borders, and it creates a new identity, if you will.
And you may add that it is based on a very, very long tradition of raising money to be sent to Israel, to be given to
the needy Jews in
Yeah.
Eretz Israel.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I may add to your comment, there is in the Zionist historiography, there is a debate. What is Zionism? What is the Zionist movement? Is it the long sentiment, the love for Eretz Israel because we are Jews and we pray for Eretz Israel every groom, as you know. When he breaks the glass under the chuppah, when he gets married in Jewish marriage, he vows, if I forget the Jerusalem, I will forget my right hand. Okay, is this Zionism? In the Zionist historiography, we refer to Zionism as the modern revolution of a political movement who is striving for a political definition of the Jews who joined this movement. Just to illustrate or to fortify this statement, I might add, bear in mind, the Jews did not actually come to Eretz Israel during the Gola, right during the years in the diaspora. It was forbidden. They were sitting in the diaspora, weeping, crying for Eretz Israel, but they did not come. Only with modernity and with the wings of the modern revolution the Zionists created, they started to flock into the country. Israel now has close to 10 million people. It started with, at the end of the 19th century, it started with, let's say, 50,000 Jews. I'm talking about the Jews, not about the Arabs. Nowadays, Israel has both religions, close to 10 million people. So they flock to Eretz Israel because the alternatives, it beats the alternative, as the saying goes. But yeah, it is a process over the time.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions or comments.
Any other questions, comments?
About feminism, maybe about the importance of the feminist tool for historical analysis. Shall I convince you that this is extremely important? But I would like to add, in more serious manner, there is a I understand that none of you is in feminist studies, right?
Yes.
My impression is correct? Okay, so there is a very important article written by an American Jewish woman, John Wallach Scott. She wrote it in the late 1980s. And there she explains the importance and the contribution this analytic tool gives us historians. It doesn't mean that each and every one of you should convert and become a feminist historian. But I was trying to demonstrate that without this tool, I would have never come to know Margulis, Dinnerman, Witzel, and half of Eretz Israel, at least half of Eretz Israel, would have been vanished from the papers, from the pages of the historic books. Because women did that. Women did that in the 1930s. Imagine the desert, the nothingness that was in Eretz Israel. The Bedouins were living in this patch of land. And here comes a lady named Ada Fishman, who is making friends with Margulis, who is taking a family money sometimes to build this beautiful house on the hill, as it was called. So, and by the way, this is not building a house. I need to state here. It is building a place. It is a place, it is a village. A village like the one we are here now. With farmers, with women workers, with women guarding the place during Arab attacks in the 1930s and so on and so forth. So she was an entrepreneur and a maverick like second to none. She was not the only one, though. I have to be here to make justice for other Zionist women, but she is the one I wrote a biography about that was published a few weeks ago. I'm still excited about her. So, yeah.
She's an example.
She is an example, yeah. To a Zionist woman of the Pale, if you will, with no education to speak of, by the way. When she became the headmistress of this farm, of this village, she went to London, apropos women's networks, she went to Visa London. They financed her, funded her trip, and she stood there for a year to study how to become a headmistress of a women's farm. So everything was done so articulately.
And there were such places where you could learn to be
Well, they were in Holland, in Britain, and in other places, and other toured Europe. And they came to see those places to choose the model that she prefers the most. It was a Hebrew-speaking place. Women guarded the place, by the way, which was a big deal. She needed a rifle. So she approaches the British security in charge. This is the southern part of Israel, by the way. Now it's not so southern anymore, but this is the southern part of Israel. So she approaches him in letters and letters and letters. And she asks him, "Give me a rifle. We cannot guard ourselves without a rifle." And he persistently says, "No, a woman will not get a rifle." Eventually she got the rifle, of course, and even more so, she trained her girls to guard the place. She was a pioneer in every way we look at it. Yeah.
We have to remember that in the intervalic period we are talking about, not in many Western countries, women have the right to vote, to be elected,
Yeah, if I add to
to
that,
study.
yeah, if I add to that, I would like, I'm using this as an opportunity to elaborate on things that are have more interest to you, I believe. So, you see, we have a double, look, I rephrase. The Zionist movement gave women the right to vote and be elected in 1898. It was a big deal, as you well stated. However, much to the women's chagrin, when the British conquered Eretz Israel, they asked the Muslims and the Jews and the Christians to start forming their own institutions. The Jews started to create their own establishments, and at that point, the religious sect, the Haredi Jews, the Orthodox Jews said, women are not going to get any vote in Eretz Israel, forget it. And a 10 years fight started between, again, Ada and her comrades, and the Haredi sect, the ultra-religious Jews, and others who negated the suffrage. And the women said, look, you, the Zionist movement, gave us the right to vote and be elected decades ago. Why are you reclining or withdrawing now from this promise? Eventually, they succeeded. As I mentioned before, in 1926, they got the vote to elect and be elected. And at that time, the United States gave the vote, France, in some levels of, depended on the women's age and marital status, gave the vote. So the Britain, after World War I, it became more prevalent to give the vote. But still, the Zionist movement was among the first ones to do that in Europe. This is a European movement. This is another thing that we have to bear in mind. The ideology, if you will, was European. Either socialist or liberal, but it was European in essence.
You are so impressed.
I would like to ask about this village. I wonder how it
Good, thank
How
you.
did it work? Like, what was this main building and how,
Okay,
how
thank
did
you
it
very
start?
much. A question from an architect, Save. The engineer who built this building was Richard Kaufmann. Richard Kaufmann was a renowned architect at the time, and he built many of the settlements in Zionist Eretz Israel. Why I choose the term Zionist Eretz Israel? Because everything we are discussing here is within the confines of the Zionist project or enterprise in Eretz Israel. We have to bear in mind that not every Jew was a Zionist even in Eretz Israel, let alone in Romania or Poland or other places. But this is the Zionist project, and Kaufmann, who came from Germany, he was a very erudite architect. He was one of the favorite ones. Ada chose him, although they were women architects as well, and feminist Ada could probably choose a woman, but still, for this main building, the house on the hill, the White House on the hill, she chose Richard Kaufmann. Why? Money. He did not want that much money as another architects wanted, and she wanted to be in charge of the plans. So Ada is negotiating with Kaufmann. She has none whatsoever understanding in agriculture, but she has a good sense of how people should live. And there is a debate about a private closet in the private chambers of the students in Ayanot. Shall we build a private closet or not? Will we have a kitchen in every corridor or not? And Ada says, we need private closet, it's more hygiene. Whereas another prominent Zionist, Hanamaiser, who had another school, said, I want it purely socialist, no private possession, none whatsoever, I don't want anything private. So she interfered with the plans that Richard Kaufmann made. It was easier for her probably to negotiate with him. But the money came from the establishment. She did not bring her own money. She did not have any. Now you see, you can give your interpretation of the style.
Wow.
Yes, this is the epitome of the modern Bauhaus style. It is clean. Look at the lines. It is clean. It is serious, no, respectful. This building, it stays till this very day. I spent good hours in Ada's room. By the way, it was her house. Eventually, she went to live in Ayanot. She was a single woman. She had no family of her own. She went to live in Ayanot. She had a room, a Spartan room in this house on the hill. I spent many good hours there, and it was to show both the ideology and the practical aspects of the Zionist project. So Richard Kaufmann, and along the time more buildings were added, because it was needed, more pupils, different, let's say, conditions, both in Europe and in Eretz Israel. So more buildings were added, but the house of the building was the jewel in the crown. And Ada indeed made it her home. I cannot say private, because she had nothing private. But she became a member of the parliament, by the way. After the State of Israel was established, Ada was a member of the Knesset for the first two parliaments, and she is the engine behind extremely important laws for women. One of them is the marital law, the age a woman and a man can marry. And the other one is, of course, the equal military draft law. And Ada stood behind both of them, and feminist ideas are her Bible. She was an observant woman. But the Bible she abided by, besides what she did, the keeping kosher, etc., was the feminist Bible.
Around how many women were living?
It varied. To be a historian now, not a cheerleader for Ada, She wanted it to be the big women's farm, the only one in the country. She wanted it to house 200 workers. It started with much less. There were a couple of dozens, even less, and it grew over the years. When it became an agricultural school, as I mentioned before, there were hundreds of pupils in Ayalot, both men and women. At the beginning, it was only for women, not girls, for young women, to study agriculture, how to cultivate the land in Eretz Israel, how to be a villager, a woman villager with theoretical knowledge. Now, if you bear in mind that most Jewish women who came to the country did not come from peasant circles, right? They became from either middle class or low middle class. They did not have the know-how of how to work the land, how to do agriculture, how to milk a cow. They didn't even know how to cook, let alone how to be a farmer or a farmer's wife. So this farm's goal was to teach them in an articulate, theoretical, both theoretical and practical manner to be a farmer, a proud farmer in Eretz Israel.
It was more kibbutz or more
Thank you. Neither. It was not a collective like a kibbutz Ada, was really looking at Marxism or socialism as the right way of living. It was not a kibbutz, although some aspects were communal. It was not a moshav, because it was not. The land was never privatized. It was a school eventually, a farm, an educational farm. The land was named after the Keren HaKayemet, the fund for Israel. The work was done by the workers and the staff. There was no private house, unlike a moshav. And there were very few families living there. The only families living in Ayanot were those of the staff. The pupils were, of course, young and single. It became one of the absorption centers in Israel after the massive influx of immigration when the state was born after 48. So Ayanot was one of those places where Yemenite Jews resided alongside with kids from Romania and other countries. It was a melting pot. And I was proud of that. And because this is too a principle of the Zionist movement, to gather, to collect all the Jews and make them in one group or society or nation, which wasn't the case in reality beforehand, as we know.
If it was a school to teach them how to farm the land in Romania, but not only, there were, before the war and just after the war, there were schools like this for teenagers and for young adults, in order afterwards to be prepared to make Aliyah.
Yes. I'm trying to remember, because I'm a historian, I cannot give a detail that is not accurate, but I'm trying to remember, did Ada visit in her excursions to Romania those places? I cannot answer with certainty, but she visited other places, that's for sure.
Are you referring to the training farms for Jewish people going to Eretz Israel? Yeah, there were. But the women, there were 9.
Yeah.
But actually, the women were discriminated in those facilities as well. I mean,
There were also some mixed
no, they were mixed.
Yeah.
But what was the problem? The men were doing the real farming, and the women were in the kitchen, not really allowed to do the farming.
Right.
Achshara groups, they were called.
Exactly.
Preparing groups. Those are different. But there were schools, actual schools, like Ayanot became in the 1950s, let's say. Schools to train people to become knowledgeable farmers. Not intuitive farmers.
He's talking in Romania.
I know. I don't know about the school like that in Romania, but in Germany they were, Holland, Britain, etc.
Nine of them.
Not chavot achshara, schools.
He's talking, okay, maybe I
Yeah,
don't
no, I'm not
understand.
talking about Chabad Shara. Yeah. Yes, so, and basically what we can conclude from what we are saying here, that again, it is transnationalistic. Because you see, we learn something in one place, we implement it in an articulated manner in another, and we create something new. And, yeah.
Both national and transnational.
Yes, both nationally and transnationally. True.
Was there another question? Răspuns implicit.
Do you want to ask in Romanian and somebody will translate for me? Go ahead.
Cineva are nevoie de întrebat în română?
Dacă vreți, pot să traduc, puteți să vă diți în română.
Tot
We
a
have
fost așa
nothing to
clar.
ask, she says.
Okay, A, it was so clear. Oh, B, but this is like, I believe, out of what you are regularly dealing with.
But that's why it's a good addition.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
it's a perspective you
Yeah, it's a
usually don't
different-
take into
yeah.
account.
Yeah.
I would like to ask something, you say always about plural feminism, I don't really understand what you mean by this tool, like there is a certain concept that you apply.
What I'm trying to say here is based upon, again, this article that John Baruch Scott wrote, and she's explaining that gender, not a gender, is a theoretical tool that helps historian to analyze history in a full manner, not in a better, in a full necessary manner, because what we knew thus far was what noble men usually told us. And men, not because they are villain or vicious, were interested in topics that women had very little touch with it, or very little influence in it. They were not interested in the private domain. They were not interested in those branches in the industry that were women's branches, and so on and so forth. They did not understand or interested in the woman's part in the family, the toil of love. Everyone has a mother behind him who raises him. Every husband has a wife usually that helps him, right? What does she do when I'm going to work? Is it important? Does it carry any value money-wise? So what I'm saying here is yes, twice the money the woman saves and the money the woman generates in her work. So this is a tool, this is an example to how gender is extremely important to analyzing historical events, phenomenon, etc. That's what she meant, and that's what I mean and what I do.
One question, maybe I wasn't listening very carefully. It was a new model of family brought by this fine woman. She had a family of her own.
Are you talking about Margulis?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Margulis was married to a prominent Jew of Bucharest.
Okay.
She was a daughter of a prominent Jew and Jewess, of a Jewish woman in Bucharest, and she had a daughter. And yeah, so Margulis was not she was a lady. She was a middle class typical lady, which makes it even more interesting. Why to join forces with this intrepid Ada? She didn't dress like a bourgeois lady. She spoke like an idealist, not like a, very well-mannered, noble woman, like Margulis probably. Why? I will say what is my understanding of the entire collaboration. Romanian women at that time, okay, I'll take one step backward. Let me say it this way. Margulis collaborated with Ada because she was a zealous Zionist. She was raised in a Zionist family, her father was a Zionist, her mother was a Zionist before her. They were Zionists. It was natural. It was the natural development for her to support Zionist enterprise. And why not an enterprise for women? Because as a bourgeois lady herself, she knows how difficult it is for women to make advancement in life. That's Margulis. Why Dinama? Why Balan? Why other women? The Vitzo group in Bucharest? Why they? And my understanding is that they needed this project to define who they are. At time of crucial change, as you probably remember from the previous lecture, it was a difficult time for Jews in Europe in general, and for Jews in Romania, not in particular maybe, but also included, let's say, for Jews in Romania included. And they wanted to carve, if you will, a place, a room of their own in the community. They no longer were satisfied with being those who embroidered the cover for the Torah. They did not want to be only those who service in the synagogue, meals, etc. No, they wanted to have a project of their own. And as I'm saying, it was not against the wish of their husbands, the patrons, against their husbands and the community leaders. It coincided with it.
For me, exists the natural next question. It is now or exists a next step after this?
Thank you so much. Now, I will do it very briefly, but this is an entirely different lecture. I will be always happy to give, but I will answer that. Nowadays, Israel, I don't know how many of you know or have been visiting, or there is somebody here who is planning to visit soon. Israel of today is very far from the Zionist project and the Israel I'm depicting in my scholarly work. Israel of today is Israel of a liberal / capitalist / American ethos. It was made so deliberately. I'm not saying if it's good or bad, it is in the eyes of the beholder. If you're asking me, I will tell you that. What is my opinion? But in any case, this was a deliberate effort to change Israel from the pioneering / socialist collective society into what it is today. Plus, the world has changed. We have to be fair. This is not just Israel. Now, in order to create a coalition in Israel, a government, a coalition in Israel, the parties after the transformation, after 77, when Begin came to power, if you're familiar with the name, had to go into one bloc, the religious Jews in Israel. Be them the more modern nationalistic Jews, or the ultra-Orthodox Haredi groups. Now, the more power these governments gained, the more power this bloc gets. As a result of that, women in Israel today are facing the third, if you will, feminist revolution, i.e., they are being excluded from the public arena in various ways. They are not supposed to go on the bus the same and to sit in the same seat as men. And they are not supposed to go, etc., etc., etc. True, this is among the ultra-Orthodoxy. Nevertheless, as we all know, revolutions start in one point, but they leak, right, into other circles as well. So Israel now, and we can see it in the army very well, the distance between Ada's law and the army today is twofold. On the one hand, unlike me, nowadays women soldiers can be fighters. I couldn't. So it is an advancement. On the other hand, women are pushed by the bloc, Orthodox bloc, more and more they are pushed out of the army altogether. So this is an antagonistic, if you will, a dichotomy that Israel now is facing, yet to be seen what will be in the future.
Another fight. Feminist.
Who knows? Who knows? Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Can you please say a word or two about this playwright?
Cecile Dinnerman.
Dinnerman, yes.
Yeah, okay. What can I say about her? Very little. She immigrated she was from Bucharest. Sylvie will help me, because Sylvie is the one who introduced me to Cecile Dinnerman. Sylvie, go ahead, do you want to say?
She was actually a member of the organization I've written about the Associația Culturală Femeilor Elveți, which became VITO in 1921, joined for VITO in 1921. So she was part of the association. She was a writer, and she wrote two plays. One of them is a biblical poema biblică. Și a doua, I don't remember now. Anyhow, she wrote two of them, and they were played in Bucharest.
In which language?
In Romanian. They were played in Bucharest in Romanian.
She was assimilated.
She was a Jew, and she donated the money that were collected from the income of the place to Ireland. I mean, she asked them to be sent to Ireland. We are trying to find more information about her.
She immigrated to Israel, right?
I don't know anything about her.
I think she immigrated to Israel, but still, we have to
And it's very frustrating, because I really. She was also a part of afterwards. She had the Avoda group. Very little information I have in the newspapers. Very few information in Femei Evrei, which is the newspaper of the association. I've been trying to find some material about her yet without any success, but
to illustrate what we were saying about the gender.
Maybe some of you find something about her, so please.
The future is full of
let us know.
surprises.
Yeah. So, but yeah, if you find something about her, send it to Sylvie, she will send it to me. Yes.
If I may add a personal comment.
Yeah.
I talked to a friend of mine who emigrated some 10 years ago to Israel, and he still doesn't have a family. It's okay for him, but difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what he said to me? In Israel, women rule.
Yeah.
And what can you say about that? And I also have an explanation with my family in Israel, because I see my cousin there, like she's almost 60.
Mm-hmm.
Second cousin, and like when they have 3 children, when she says something, like doesn't matter, he does it.
Like an army commander, right?
Yes. And I guess it's you say there is this thing in the society, but inside the family, I guess things changed. At least in my family.
If I may, I will put it in a historical perspective, if you let me do that.
But it was very strange for me to hear him saying this.
Yeah.
And giving me examples that I don't remember.
Yeah.
But he was very persuasive.
Women, Jewish women in Eastern Europe, these are the women referred to, always have worked, but the work did not mean much. A, they were not educated. B, their husbands were many times Torah learners, or did not have enough economic opportunities to make a decent living. So women always worked. As a result of that, women ruled. In Eastern European families, women indeed ruled. This is the historical phenomenon that we are dealing with. When they arrived to pre-state, to the Zionist movement, the pre-state Israel, the ideology supported that. Be it due to tradition, be it due to the fact that men, that's what they knew, their mothers ruled, and they continue that. However, this does not exclude the other phenomenon that I'm mentioning, that they were also pushed and discriminated from power positions, like today. For every CEO or manager, or you name it, in the high economic level, you find more men, many more men than women. So you have these two ways. On the one hand, women rule, and on the other hand, maybe because of this, they are being pushed all the time to either not necessarily to the margins, but they are being pushed into a seclusion. Especially the way they look and appear in the public arena. There are many symbolic ways it is being done, but still these are two contradictory channels. One, empowerment, and the other is totally the opposite. So yeah, the women in the family are very strong. They have a lot of leeway, a lot of, how would I, yeah.
Golda Meir and her kitchen.
Yeah, now another thing is Golda Meir. This is the killer of the feminist sentiment in Israel. Why? Because men used Golda Meir to do exactly that, symbolically to show, look at us! We have a woman prime minister! Nobody else did, very few did. It was true, yet Golda Meir was not a feminist. She did not promote women. She did not actually fight for feminist values. So this is this double-edged, not double-edged sword, this is the ambiguity of women's place in the Zionist society in Eretz Israel and Israel. So yeah, it is ambivalence that men are afraid on the one hand. Among the religious bloc that I was mentioning before, it is a political struggle. They would like to preserve their power on their flock, and they don't want to share it with women. And they do it in those ways that I exemplified earlier. But this is a political power, nothing to do with religious beliefs. Ada, by the way, would have supported me on that. It has nothing to do with religion or God. It has to do with power.
But what happens in the families of the Haredi? Don't the ladies have anything to say about it?
Oh yeah, a big change. Women are divorcing their husbands. Women are leaving. Women are getting hit by their husbands. There is a family violence within the family, and there is a growing percentage of people who live this way of life. So
Not only women.
no, not only women, in general speaking, yeah, not only women. So those changes create a transformation within the Haredi bloc, be them Hasidim, be them others, it doesn't really matter now. So you see both tendencies. This doesn't go without the other. One supports the other or negates the other. So it is extremely interesting. The Israeli society is in a transitional stage, I would say, right now. Due to various reasons, which we don't get into, but yeah.
Just wanted to say one more word about Simona's comment about the tools of feminism, if I may. It's not that it's like the tools of, like the tools that Bat Sheva has been using is anyone who is dealing with feminist, her story, as John Balak Scott says, not only his story, because the history was written mainly by men until the late 20th century. Let's take just an example of today, okay? It's not that somebody wanted to be against feminists, or no, but I asked the president of our Kehillah, he talked about so many personalities in Jewish life. I counted at least 28. Afterwards, I stopped counting. And he also wrote a book, by the way, which I read. And he mentions all those big personalities who changed and did so many things to be Jewish here in Romania. All of them men. So when I asked him about women, he said, yes, I might remember one or maybe two. There were many more, but still, if if they are not researched and if they are not brought to the stage, and if nobody knows anything about them, so the picture is somehow disproportional. I mean, we all think that there are only men who did history or did something for Jewish life here in Romania, whereas the truth is that women had their contribution, and they had a great contribution to the life of Jewish women here in Romania. At least that's what I'm researching. Before the Shoah, during the Shoah, where they really risked their lives, and they had amazing activity. So yes, that's a completing part of history. It's not changing the history, it's not rewriting it, it's just another perspective. It's bringing to life their activity and not only men's activity.
But eventually it rewrites history, because fields that were either ignored or neglected are coming to the forefront of historical research. So it is changing the way we look at historical phenomena.
Okay.
Okay. Good. Thank you very much.